to the discussion on class rank and PE waiver.
Jim Franco, a guidance counselor, is here tonight. He's our local expert on class rank. And Miss Augustine, the assistant principal of student services.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So the discussion of class rank has been, and Laura can attest to this, has been something that's been ongoing for probably the last 10 years. And with our fourth quarter grading last year being significantly impacted, especially with us following the state guidelines for do no harm to students, we really had to make some significant changes in fourth quarter grading, and oftentimes the grade wasn't a true reflection of the students' work. So for the second semester of the 2019-20 school year, students were not ranked. So our graduating seniors, whatever their class rank was at the end of first semester, that was the rank that remained on their transcript. So no better time than right now to discuss class rank and the possibility of eliminating it. I know I provided a couple of articles that was in support, that are in support of eliminating class rank, as well as a list of approximately 50 schools in the surrounding area that have already eliminated rank. And I brought in reinforcements with Mr. Franco because he, I think, has the most up-to-date sort of knowledge about class rank, and I'm going to let him take it away from here.
Great. So, I mean, the one question is why? So, where does this even come from? I mean, I think back, early '90s when I applied to college, and rank was pretty important. But maybe about 15 years ago or so, a lot of school districts, what they were finding, especially if you have a high-achieving student body, you could have a student with relatively good grades who's in the bottom 50th percent, of the class. So, this is more like kind of your stereotypical, North Shore schools that we're seeing a lot of that. Students kind of, not being negatively affected by the whole ranking system. So a lot of those schools, I mean, I gave you a list of some schools that have dropped rank. And say that happened, a lot of those happened like 10, 15 years ago. And then we had some discussion about it. So there's always that aspect. How does it, are students being negatively affected by being ranked? The other thing, too, is I think rank is probably was more of a relic of a time when knowledge was harder to come by about a student. So, you had everything on a piece of paper, that they didn't have all these reps going out to these high schools, learning about these high schools. So making an admission decision, the rank sort of helps, okay, how is this student, relative to his or her peers? So, I think, the one thing that we're always trying to do, some people make the argument, okay, the good thing about rank, and I can see this argument, the good thing about rank is for the students that are competitive, maybe it pushes them to push themselves more. I can see that side of things. You also see that there can be sort of a corruption of why I take the class. So I'm not taking the class because I feel like it would be best for my knowledge base, best for my intellectual skills. I'm taking it because I want to be ranked in the top 10% of my class instead of, the top 15% of the class. So, and I always think, what are we really, we don't want this, I would argue, we don't want the students to compete against each other. We want them to compete against themselves. We want them to be working as hard as they possibly can. It's kind of, just because you're the best of a group, that doesn't mean you're doing a really good job necessarily. Like Golden State Warriors, they're winning national or NBA championships, but they wouldn't have won any in the 90s because the best basketball team in the history of the sport was playing, right? So that would be an example. So now this other stuff would be
Jim Franco Levy.
so these are some thoughts.
Brings it right back here.
Effect on course choices that, again, kind of students taking it more because they want to add weight, not necessarily because they're maybe interested in a certain career path. They end up not going down that route because they're more worried about the weighted coursework. definitely hear students say a decent amount of the time saying, I don't want to take that class because it's not weighted. Or they'll take a class simply because it's weighted, like I kind of was saying before. And sometimes you'll have teachers that are, let's say whatever, harder graders, more rigorous, and students want to avoid that. And when that might be in their best interest long-term intellectually because of the fear about how it's going to affect rank. And then, so the competition aspect thing, so there gets to be a little bit, sometimes, not all students, but there's a bit of a gaming kind of that goes on. So for example, we have this policy that you can have a credit, no credit for a non-graduation requirement or PE. And many students are not attuned to that. Some students are very privy to it, and they come in right off the bat, first semester, freshman year, they're taking PE credit, no credit. So the advantage of that is if you're, have a weighted GPA above a 4 and you get an A in PE, that's still bringing your weighted GPA down. So like number one student in our class this year, I think was like a 4.609. So now it can be pretty substantial. So let's say you had a student that every semester waived PE, that would be about a 0.15 difference in GPA. So you could have, I looked up like the number 20 a student had a 4.432. I don't know if he or she, what he or she did with PE classes and waiving, but if that student hadn't, let's say they did, they would have gone up from 20 to like 2 or 3, just because they sort of knew, how the game was played to some level. So, I think that's always a concern, the whole gaming aspect of things. So I gave you that stuff, and then of course college admissions. So I gave you a little bit of that's from a National Association for College Admission Counseling. That chart, just trying to show you where rank kind of falls, for most schools in terms of order of importance. And it used to be like 1993, 42% of colleges saying, kind of a very important factor, considerable importance, and then a couple years ago it was down to 9%. And then just talking to admission counselors, I emailed people, but I know LT did a study 8 years ago. They contacted a ton of people. The consensus is pretty much, you'll hear people, they'll say something like, we don't need it, we don't use it. It'd be nice, it's nice if you have it, but it's not mandatory. Some schools like New Trier does like a grade distribution on their profile so that an admission officer can get an idea of like what do these grades mean in the context of that student's peers. Because that's another way to get similar information across. But I chose a couple comments and put that on that sheet so you could see that. Sometimes college scholarships come up. What if there's a ranking aspect to, you have to be in the top 10% of your class for a certain college scholarship. So same kind of thing. You could have, like Augustana has a scholarship. I was looking at this the other day. And it basically said you had to be in the top 10% of your class, of your high school class. So that would be unweighted. That would be a 3.9 GPA. So that would be pretty much straight A's. And then they actually say on their website, if your school doesn't rank, that caveat is removed, essentially. I mean, that's an isolated thing, but things like that can pop up. And then I guess lastly, just additional info. I showed you, those are in order. And Triton would be the number one schools most of our kids apply to, but then in order, there's, UIC, U of I. I just wanted to show you kind of how they look at things and how they treat it, just to show you that there's no sort of negative effects from most colleges. And, the last thing, sometimes it comes up, like stress. We're stressing students out about rank. I mean, I don't love that concern because I feel like part of that is competition is a part of life. So how do you navigate that? I would approach it more from the standpoint of, is it the right approach to academics, to learning? We want the students to compete against themselves, not just because I'm doing better than one of my peers, something along those lines. Okay. You have any questions?
Beth, do you have anything you want to add? So the reason that we were bringing this forward to the board in July for a timing perspective is that we would want to be, if the board chooses to make a decision to eliminate class rank, we would want to be able to communicate that now before the seniors start their senior year. Secondly, Beth had advised the board and myself that the curriculum council for sure that class rank will be off because of that fourth quarter of last school year, and not having students complete their courses in the manner of where their grades could be impacted from the fourth quarter, and kids receiving only their third quarter grade and only having the ability to go up. That does throw a wrinkle into our current ranking system for our current upcoming senior class. Is that correct, Ben?
Any student that was a student last year.
Any student.
Right. Their rank will never be accurate. We made a notation on the transcript this year, that due to the lack of in-person learning, so on and so forth, so that colleges were aware. I do want to just bring up one other point. Could you speak to College Board's application, that if you don't rank, that there would be an option, there's always that option if we wanted to look at students at the top quarter or, that's also an option at college.
Some schools will report decile and quintile, quartile, so it's another way to get at similar information. And on the Common App, they always ask, what's the number one student's GPA, something along those lines. But you don't have to have that information in the Common.
So I do have a question, though, because we posted on the fence that, we were highly ranked as a high school, and that's really important.
Right.
We also really like it when we're ranked very highly in our sports competitions. Right? So what are we proposing? In lieu of that, graduation, the top 10 students are recognized, and I think it's important.
I think Dr. Freitas has a recommendation that he was going to bring up, but I wanted to make sure there weren't any questions first for Beth or Jim.
Yeah, and the question of ranking, it's a great question, and I think the nice thing about competition, sports competition, is it's really clear. There's a winner and there's a loser. For example, school rankings, you brought that up. What are the criteria to judge that school or that student? So when I think about learning, for example, how do you measure intellectual creativity? That's a tough one, to get at. And can you reduce it to? Can you legitimately say this student over here is number 2 is better than number 11? And maybe if number 11 has a really phenomenal idea of civic duty, that's not necessarily measured in that rank. So I guess what I'm saying is I think the rankings are only as good as the information you're using to make those rankings. So that would be my thought on it.
Dr. Freitas, you want to touch on what you were going to recommend?
I have it in my principal's report. I could do that right now.
I would have you just speak to that piece right now.
Okay. Give me one quick second, guys. Let me just.
So you had said you did the GPA, the top and the 20. Do you know the 50%?
Roughly, this is more of a, I don't know the median was like a 3.3. So here you'd have a good number of students, with a 3.0 would be in the bottom half of their class at RB.
Bottom half of the class, and then 3.0.
And because we weight all of our AP courses, we weight all of our honors courses, you can have a significant portion of the class at the top. So when you're looking at the difference between the number 1 student, the number 10 student, it's, a very, very small
the margin. So the weighted grades go away then?
Mm-mm.
The weights remain?
The weights would still remain. Yeah, we would still continue to weight AP courses and weight honors courses the same. So when a college is reviewing a student's transcript, they would, see if the student earned a 4.3. And it's also, they're going to see the AP courses and the honors courses listed on their transcript, but if a student has a GPA that's above a 4.0, that's certainly an indication that that student took advantage of AP or honors level courses. And I still, I know that college is the number one factor that they really look at is, did the student sample the rigorous coursework that their high school provided and offered?
So I'm very interested in the alternatives kind of being discussed, but I guess just to say it one more time. So anyone who was a student in the spring of 20 has a GPA that is now not calculated in the same manner as classes in the past.
That is their ranking.
Yes.
Their ranking.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever rank they had
It's missing one
At the
semester.
end of the first semester of the 1920 school year is the rank that's currently, that will stay with them.
Well, I think that's an important piece, right? It's this gap in time, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were multiple boards who were not on this list looking at this point, because it's an opportunity in some ways.
I would
go,
also
go.
just comment that, in my opinion, this is also an equity issue. It'd be interesting if you had some stats on how many in the last 5 years, 10 years, how many of our students of color are in that number. Because in my opinion, this is also an equity issue, right? Those kids are not being recognized properly for the hard work that they're doing. Again, growth versus achievement, and in this article that was sent to us a few weeks ago, right? Are you selecting talent or developing talent? And like that, I think that just says it all right there. Obviously, you know where I stand.
But if we look at our valedictorian, why would we want to take away such an achievement? The valedictorian was a Latino student.
Well,
Number one achiever.
that's Dr. Freitas is going to talk to us about. I am also in school, and in the way that I run my department at where I work is you should reward what you want more of, right? And there are other ways to do that than class rank. So, right? Because we're here to educate kids. So when they do well, how are we recognizing them?
And, and that leads into my question.
There
We
you
did not
go.
work on this together. So I think the question that the board should consider when talking about topics, how do we recognize academic excellence? Traditionally, we've ranked our students. So today I'm just going to talk about an alternative on how to recognize academic excellence. It is referred to the Latin honor system, which is very similar to what colleges do. Summa cum laude means with highest honors. Magna cum laude means with high honors. Cum laude is with honors. So what schools have done, there's some of our neighbors, that have done something similar, like more in Hinsdale South and Central. LT does something similar, but a little different. And I'll give you to the why. So they've decided for GPA purposes, cum laude is 3.0 to 3.49. 3.5 to 3.9 is magna cum laude, and summa is 4.0 and above. But the more important reason is the why. Why go from class rank to a Latin honor system? It gives more opportunity for students to be recognized. It rewards students for academic excellence measured against a standard of excellence instead of comparing to their peers. And you said it, Ms. Towner, excellently, is it may promote high academic achievement among minorities because it's an equity issue. For so many years, minorities have been disenfranchised, have been beat up, have been ranked in the bottom, And what happens, it's hard to stay motivated, start to stay engaged for a people, for a group. So if you put that standard, more than likely you will get Latinos and Blacks to aim to succeed, to raise their GPAs. So those are the reasons why, and this is just one system. There are many systems. You could use the Latin system. You could use your own unique verbiage, but to address and help Latinos and Blacks achieve, to motivate them, to reward for a standard. Here's the standard you can aim it, to have it clear, defined, and to provide more opportunities to recognize our students, to recognize groups of students, because you also brought up, Ms. Towner, a very important, item. How many of Latino and Black students have been ranked, let's say, in the top 10, top 20, top 50, I've seen a few, but this is an opportunity to include more of our changing student and our changing demographics. So this is just one example. I'm more than willing to, in future meetings, bring more examples, but I think this is one that many schools have gone to align themselves with not only colleges, but to also promote more success among the minority students.
Can you talk about how some of those schools then handle to Laura's question, the valedictorian issue? Like, does the class come together to select a representative entity?
And we do that here.
We don't.
I'm sorry, for the top 10, no?
We go by the top 10.
Yeah, so for the top 10, the students vote for some speakers, you know? So I know, for example, at other schools I worked at Morton, you kind of do like a peers voting for a speaker to speak at the graduation. So kind of like we have our student association president speak, and then the student body picks a student or two more, you know, from the top 10 to speak to their class. So that's how it could be handled. You know, I think we have some pieces in place.
How are we going to recognize the top? That academic excellence, that 4-year achievement, and there were many Latinos in our top 10 this year. Let's not take this away. We work so hard. You work, and I'm not saying rank is the all with all.
Yeah.
You know, I used to calculate the rank among orthopedic surgeons, and they were all in the 99% of their graduating class, and I had to line them all up. And even though they were 99% among all medical students, somebody was last. It's a mathematical formula. I understand that. But there's also that point of, so, okay, if we're going to move away from the formula, because the formula has some flaws, how do we also recognize that special group? I like the categories because more people can get in a standard that's objective. You know, and you can make that, and maybe classes are pass-fail. We've talked about let's take them out of the formula. But then where's that golds, that top, that really top prize?
So one thing I think you could do is look at what the cutoff was for the top 10 students over the past 10 or 15 years, and that could then, you could identify a GPA cutoff that could then be that top category where those students are getting that recognition, because then it's not a moving target and it's not only limited to 10 students, but you're saying over the past 15 or 20 years, this is about where, you know, our most elite students have stood in regards to their GPA. And then as long as students know that, they know what target they're trying to hit, and you could still recognize that top group of students.
But then don't we still have the manipulation of the GPA, which is what we were talking about? So if I'm a band student, I don't have to take PE. I just take an AP class, and now I jumped ahead of the football player.
Sure, and that GPA cutoff could be adjusted for, you know, that manipulation of the GPA. That could all be done in the analysis. But then that way you're still having, you know, that elite group of students that really does excel. And I think that would certainly be well more than 10 students, without a doubt.
And this is something, as Kristen speaks to, defining, you know, what makes each category that we would define as a committee. If we were to go this way, we'd include people, you know, so we can solidify and define the categories to make sure that we still, you know, honor not only the very top, but, you know, as many students as possible. So we'd work through all the minor details on how to make sure that we recognize as many students as possible for their achievements.
You know, my only concern, you know, everybody likes that book, The Rainbow Fish. And, you know, that rainbow fish, he's beautiful, he has all the scales, but then he's only wonderful when he gives them all away. I don't want us to regress to the mean and everybody equal, because we really do prize that elite student, that elite group. I think there's a time and place when, yeah, we can have all the categories, that's great, but let's not also lose that student who is above and beyond. I mean, we have a board member here who is an elite artist and has done something and you recognize for your work. These are lifetime accomplishments, and that's what inspires people to move on and do something bigger than themselves. So however that is, and for me to replace the rank, how the conversation would be, how do we recognize that elite group also with expanding the categories?
Well, I think we can revisit this again in August, and Dr. Freitas, if you want to work with Ms. Augustine and the counselors to bring a final recommendation on the Latin rank system or another system you want to come up with, and may or may not fully meet Ms. Horeska's question or task, but I think we should give it one more shot to go around, let's see what Hector brings as a final recommendation. Is the board okay with that?
Yeah, can I make a suggestion that
Sure.
we have our student reps starting in August? This is a great thing for them to weigh in on. Obviously as non-voting members of the board, but they have a different perspective, and so I think their input, you could maybe reach out to them and get their feedback on the Latin system or the whole concept, that'd be helpful.
They can be on, you can reach out to them now like we're doing they're on the COVID committee as well, so
Yep.
you could talk to them as well.
Well, yeah, because we do want to,
We gotta have a decision on this in August.
Right, so, and I'm trying to be mindful of the schedule there, but I do
Right,
think
right.
this would be a very meaty thing for a student rep to,
sure, yeah,
have some
had them
interest
for a
in.
reason, right? We should use them.
Talk about.
Mr. Franco, you can go. Miss August, you gotta stay.
Thank you.
Miss Lindquist, are you coming up forward, please? Give us a little. I would like you to, please.
Oh my God, why is it always like this whole thing when she's gonna talk?
She's just so
Good, I don't have
excited
to
to come
say
talk to
anything
us.
now.
all the time.
now you really can
Done.
be quiet.